It is 9:31, and I'd like to call to order the teleconference meeting of the Finance-Auditing Committee of Thursday, September 23rd, 2021. And once again, before we begin, please note the meeting is being recorded, and Madam Secretary, can you please call the roll?
Thank you. Director Cochran.
Here.
Director Grosboll.
Here.
Director Maston.
Here.
Director Cheerio.
Here.
Vice Chair Fredericks.
Good morning.
Chair Rabbit.
Here.
And President Parr.
Here.
Thank you. You have a quorum. You are also Committee of the Whole. You have on the line also Director Garbarino, Director Hill, and Director Snyder. I'm going to confirm staff is back with us again. Dennis Mulligan.
Here.
Joe Wire.
Yes.
Perfect. Ava Barr Furbish.
Present.
Kim Manolius.
I'm here.
Thank you. Steve Miller.
Present.
Mona Babauta.
Present.
Jim Swindler.
Present.
And Kelly Hopper.
Good morning.
Thank you. That confirms staff on the line.
Great, thank you. Once again, I want to remind everyone to mute their phones until after the staff's presentation, and remember to unmute when we open up for director's discussion. After staff's presentation, I will be asking for any questions, comments, and/or concerns on the item. If there are any, the Secretary or I will call on you accordingly. And after the discussion, we will ask for any public comment before moving on. Please follow along by referring to the page numbers located in the bottom right-hand corner of your meeting packet. And Madam Secretary, can you please introduce that first item?
Thank you, Chair Rabbit. Item number 3 is the ratification of previous actions by the Auditor Controller, and that packet of commitments, ratification, and investments is before you and begins on page 3. As a quick reminder, Ms. Murphy is on leave, and Auditor Controller Joseph Wire is on the line and available to answer any questions that directors may have concerning the report.
Great. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns for Mr. Wire on item number 3?
This is Director Cheerio. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about the yield curve. I mean, we get a comment on that every time.
Thank you, Director. I'd be happy to comment on the yield curve. As you notice, that's for those of you following along, that was page 8, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, bottom of page 8. We've seen in the last few months that the long-term rates have risen slightly, and that continued in this particular graph. Generally speaking, that's considered favorable because, as you guys know, the short-term rates are almost nothing. And that means that people, when the financiers are looking out into the future, they're thinking the economy is going to pick up and the rates will go up slightly. They're still not very high. They're still very low in that respect. So in a sense, it's a positive sign. Any other questions?
I actually asked with some levity, but that was good. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Happy to oblige.
I think there was a story this morning regarding the Fed's anticipated relaxation, I suppose, of purchasing going forward and how that will affect overall rates in the future. So stay tuned. I think we're in for just need to be nimble and stay on top of things. Madam Secretary, is there anyone else from the board, or I think this concludes the discussion on this item. Before we take our vote, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on item number 3?
We have no speakers on this item.
Great. Can I have a motion on this item, please, to accept the report?
I'll move.
And a second?
Second, Director Cheerio.
Great. We have a motion and a second. Madam Secretary, can you please do a roll call vote?
Thank you. Starting with Director Arnold. Absent. Director Conroy. Absent. Director Fredericks.
Yes.
Director Garbarino.
Yes.
Director Giudice. Absent. Director Grosboll.
Yes.
Director Hernandez. Absent. Director Hill.
Yes.
Director Maston.
Aye.
Director Melgar. Absent. Director Rabbit.
Aye.
Director Rodoni. Absent. Director Snyder.
Aye.
Director Stephanie? Absent. Second Vice President Cochran?
Yes.
First Vice President Theriault?
Yes.
And President Parr?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. That motion passes unanimously.
Great, thank you all. We'll move on then to agenda item number 6, since there are no actions to authorize for items 4 or 5. Agenda item 6 is to authorize execution of the professional services agreement 2021-D039, on-site medical services with Pivot On-Site Innovations. The staff report begins on page 23, and Deputy General Manager of Administration and Development, Kelly Hopper, is on to present the report. Kelly, go ahead and start, please.
Thank you so much. Good morning. We're seeking authority to execute a contract for on-site medical services for a 3-year base contract with 2 1-year options, exercisable at the general manager's discretion, to Pivot On-Site Innovation in October 1 of this year, in a not-to-exceed amount for the base contract of $1,712,873, and then the 2 1-year options not to exceed $563,291. We issued a contract, an RFP, in June of this year for on-site employment and injury medical services provided at the district. This was done for efficiencies, not only in the delivery of our service, but also in the delivery of our operations to try to minimize the impacts to our operations. Additionally, as I believe we've mentioned early on in the pandemic, we were starting to have some difficulties with scheduling with certain testing facilities due to COVID impacts, both on COVID testing as well as their staff impacts at the various facilities. So we issued an RFP. We received one bidder back, one proposal back, which was from Pivot On-Site. And Pivot will be doing several services here for the district, but primarily it will be a lot of our evaluations and testings, our audiogram testing, our drug and alcohol, which is our STA testing, which is very important to us. That's where we were having difficulties during the pandemic, was getting our testing in that facility, follow-up drug testing, also the administration of vaccines that we have to have here at the district, particularly during this pandemic. They will also conduct our pre-employment physicals for us, as well as our biannual medical clearances. So they really will, it will be the ability to manage all of those services, which take sometimes some difficulty in scheduling and in timing for operations. It will bring them in-house, so to speak, and where we can do that physically from the San Rafael Transit Center. The services that were provided in the contract are all exclusive. It's a fixed fee. There are some additional or optional services that the district may choose to exercise in terms of things like respirator fit testing and some other optimization physical testing or programs that they could implement. So I'm available to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate that. Are there any questions, comments, concerns on this item?
This is President Parr. I have a question, please.
Please go ahead, President Parr.
Kelly, where are they located? Are any of their services on site, or do our employees go off site to get their services?
Thank you, President. It is actually on site. We are using an existing trailer that was unutilized, and so they are in that facility. It has, I believe, 3 small rooms, along with some bathroom facilities to be able to perform the drug testing.
Oh, perfect. Okay, thank you very much.
Great. Anyone else have any questions?
Yes, this is Director Theriault.
Please go ahead, Mike.
Okay. So I have 3 questions, Kelly or Ms. Hopper, and I may do a follow-up question or 2, depending on the responses. How are we obtaining these services now? That's the first question. What is the universe of potential providers? I mean, how big is it? And why did we only get one RFP?
So we are currently utilizing them as part of the pandemic, the General Manager's emergency response for procurement. So we have been using them during the pandemic because we were having difficulty reaching and meeting our FTA goals, particularly when it was for our drug alcohol testing protocols. So we have been using them. It is not a large universe, and in fact, Pivot believes that they are really on the bleeding edge of this industry, although it seems that there are more people maybe that are trying to enter the space, aren't able to stand up. I know some of our partner agencies have been very interested in the district's experience during the pandemic because they're having very similar situations. So Pivot has a robust product offering, which is why a lot of the Fortune 500 companies are utilizing them. We can mix with several of the big names that we all know, and they're using them. And then I'm sorry, I forgot the third question, Director Theriault.
In answering the question about the universe of providers, you pretty much answered it, and that was why was there only one response to the RFP?
There are some boutique companies out there that will come in and they only do drug and alcohol testing, or there will be a boutique company that can come in and only do workers' comp initial if someone trips and spills on the facility. But in order to have a comprehensive program or a client or a proposer, they really are leading it in terms of being able to provide comprehensive services, almost like a full site medical program on a employer site.
This is the general manager. If I may add, we started this with the onset of the pandemic because it was difficult to obtain services. But even prior to the pandemic, it was incredibly inefficient to send employees off-site to a myriad of different locations for physicals required every other year, random drug tests, post-accident drug tests, and other things. So it's incredibly valuable to us operationally. It greatly facilitates the scheduling staff. Staff is away from work much less. So while there may be only one vendor today, as more and more companies and transit agencies start embracing this, we anticipate the universe will likely grow.
I will add that I hope that the universe grows as well, because it would be unfortunate if we did not see competition and had to face resultant price increases as a result of a lack of competition. So thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Anyone else have any questions? I share the concerns over the sold response, and just want to make sure that we're not, it's what is it, $560,000 a year or thereabouts, and the dollars that we're spending are being spent wisely and efficiently. So I do trust staff on that particular piece and know that we have to maneuver through this universe. But I do hope that there's some others that could step forward. I can tell you that our county is experiencing similar dilemmas with, for instance, jail healthcare. We got one response as well through WellPass, and even that's a little controversial. So there's not a lot of universe out there for much of this type of work. So hopefully someone will see an avenue and go for it. I guess that concludes discussion on this item, if there's no one else with anything. But before we move on, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on item number 6?
We have no speakers for item 6.
Great. With that, can I have a motion to approve item number 6, the contract?
So moved.
And a second?
I'll second it.
Great. And Madam Secretary, can you please do a roll call vote?
Thank you. Voting on item number 6, starting with Director Arnold. Absent. Director Conroy. Absent. Director Fredericks.
Yes.
Director Garbarino.
Yes.
Director Giudice. Absent. Director Grosboll.
Yes.
Director Hernandez. Absent. Director Hill.
Yes.
Director Maston.
Aye.
Director Melgar. Absent. Director Rabbit.
Aye.
Director Rodoni. Absent. Director Snyder.
Aye.
Director Stephanie. Absent. Second Vice President Cochran.
Yes.
First Vice President Theriault.
Yes.
And President Barr.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes unanimously.
Great, thank you all. We'll move on to item number 7. That's the status report on the fiscal year 21-22 budget. That report begins on page 25. And Joe Wire, can you please present this report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the committee as a whole. In front of you is the status report on this year's budget. This is through the first 2 months of the fiscal year, so July and August. The budget, as we have discussed last month, is there is an operating deficit, but it will be balanced by the use of one-time federal funding that the district has received. We'll be still monitoring this report. It has value in keeping the committee fully appraised to the activities of the bridge, bus, and ferry, and bringing in toll and fare revenue and how that's changing. To take a look at that, you just if you could page down to page 27, and on that you will see the familiar little table, although it's much smaller at the beginning of the year. We'll be adding lines to it potentially as we go through the year. The top right-hand side is the original deficit that was in the budget, and then as we go down, there are ways that we are funding it. And the far right-hand column is the negative of the deficit. At the very bottom, you can see that there's a 0, so we believe that the budget, projecting the budget will be balanced. An important thing is number 3. These numbers are on the far left-hand side. That's the section where we'll look at the actual fare and toll revenue activity as it goes. The details, of course, are in the reports that follow this on the next couple of pages. But both bridge, bus, and ferry, and we'll see this in the next report too, are producing more revenue than we had projected. Whether that will continue as we go through the year, that's what we'll be monitoring. And then line A, which is at the bottom, that's the use of toll revenue carryover funds, and these are funds that we've projected from previous years where the district received one-time federal revenue, was able therefore not to spend a little bit of toll revenue, and we're carrying that over to offset the projected deficit in the subsequent year. And so we're going to be using almost $11 million of that in addition to balance the budget. If there are any questions on that, I'd happy to answer it.
Great, thanks, Joe. Any questions for Joe? Well, not hearing any. I think that concludes the discussion on this item. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on item number 7?
We have no speakers for this item.
Okay, great. No action is required for this item. So moving on then to item number 8, we have the monthly review of the Golden Gate Bridge traffic tolls and bus and ferry transit patronage fares. That's on page 35. And again, Joe Wire will present this item as well as 9A, the monthly statement of revenue and expenses. That's on page 43. And 9B, the monthly statement of capital programs and expenditures. That's on page 53. Joe, can you please begin your presentations?
Absolutely, thank you. If we could turn to page 37, the familiar landscape table that we have there. Again, this is through the first 2 months of the year, so it doesn't give you too much data yet. It's the important thing to sort of recognize with this landscape table is it no longer has any data on it from the pre-COVID time. This is just during COVID now because COVID has, as we know, gone longer than we ever imagined. And this table only encompasses 2 years worth of data, and now that it has moved past the COVID period. So what this table will measure will be how this fiscal year, does compare to last fiscal year, and that means it'll show if we're improving on the COVID era of last year. As you can expect, we are. And that's a good sign. Things were considerably worse last year this time. So if you look at the far right-hand side top box, the numbers in bold at the bottom of that top box, they represent the financial resources that the bridge toll revenue is bringing in, and they're up. The far right-hand column is 12%. That means we're getting 12% more revenue than we projected in the budget. And then just to the left of that is a number of 28.5%. That means 28.5% more than we got last year. That is to be expected. Things were in a really bad shape last year. Of course, if we did have data from the pre-COVID era, bridge revenues would still be down around 20%. Toll revenue, fare revenues would be down by 70% in bus and 85% in ferry, roughly. Then if you go down to the next boxes, staying on the right-hand side, the one in the middle is bus revenue. If you look at those same two bolded numbers at the bottom of that box, the amount that the district's revenue, bus fare revenue is over last year, over the budget is 13.6%, and then it's 69.6%, just the number just to the left of that, over last year. So you can see buses made considerable strides from where it was previously. Going down even one more square, those same two numbers represent ferries, fare revenue, and they're up even more because, as we remember, ferry patronage was very, very, very low last year, in the single digits. So we've seen ferry revenue up by 90% over, but we budgeted in 500% over where it was last year. Still lots and lots of room to grow. So each month we can take a quick look at those just so you can see how things have been improving over the previous year. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take it. Otherwise, we would turn to page 43 and take a look at the financials.
Hey, Joe, could you, once again, and I understand it's important to go year over year, but since we're kind of focused on recovery of pre-COVID numbers, you said we're plus or minus 80% on bridge tolls right now. And what were the two numbers for bus, ferry?
But bus, we're getting about 25 to 30% of our original ridership. It depends on the day. And then in ferry, 15 to 20% of our original ridership.
Okay. I think that's, I know that a lot of us focus on that, those numbers because when are we going to get back to those pre-COVID numbers going forward? So I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So why don't you go ahead? I think you had us turning to page 43.
Yeah, please turn to page 43 for the financials. And we'll just take a look at the first page. If you're familiar, this just sums up in a very simple fashion what is in line item detail in the charts to follow. And happy to answer any questions on those, but we'll just look at the first page here. The first set of numbers going down the page, about in the middle of the page, represent district revenues, consolidated revenues for the first 2 months. They are approximately up by $3.4 million over the budget, and that's primarily due to the tolls and fares that we talked about. Tolls and fares are higher than we originally budgeted, although we do have budgeted growth increases in both. So unless patronage on the bus and ferry and passenger trips on the bridge continue to grow, our assumptions may catch up with ourselves, catch up with our current levels, and that's something we'll be following as we go forward in the next couple of months. But it is a very good sign. The next set of numbers down is the consolidated district expenses. Expenses are lower than budgeted by quite a bit, a little less than $5 million. And primarily, that was that the district, for a variety of reasons, budgeted itself ready to respond to returning patronage. In other words, in order to have the resources in its budget to expand its ridership, expand its service levels, if there was a demand to do so. This was, remember, put together in spring. And in spring, we had a different view. We didn't understand the impact, of course, that the Delta variant was going to have. We did not understand the extension that was going to come of the social distancing orders. So we were projecting more returning of jobs to the downtown San Francisco area. And as you guys are all aware, that did not happen yet, and it has been delayed. So therefore, those expenses have been delayed, which is fortunate considering the district is living on one-time revenue from the federal government. So it's been beneficial, and that's just a important part of both for the board and the staff to understand that the district is and will continue to be to hold on to those expense levels until the demand is there that can support putting out more service. Lastly, the last set of numbers are the consolidated revenues over expenses. So the district, the first number shows the district is operating has an operating deficit of about $2.6 million through the first 2 months, and that will be, as we said, funded through the one-time revenue that we've received from the federal government. And as I mentioned, the line item details are all below in the next 3 or 4 pages. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Great, thanks, Joe. Any questions for Joe on any of those items?
Yeah, Director Maston, I have a question.
Please go ahead.
On page 51, our statement of net position, 21 looks pretty bad compared to 20. Is that just a timing issue, or is there something else going on?
The way down at the bottom page, you mean net position at the bottom? Yes. Yeah. Very much a timing issue. You have a representation of where we were 1 year to the next. But I will look into that, and why don't you give me next month, and we'll look at next position after the first quarter. I'm expecting it to have changed just from looking at the data there. I don't think we picked up all the data that's necessary to be in that chart, that table. Just from looking at it, you can tell it looks to be missing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks to be missing some data. So let's put that off until Jim, until next month. And if I get a corrected one sooner, I'll send it out.
Okay. Thank you, Joe.
Sure.
Any other questions for Joe? All right, that concludes the discussion on this item. Anyone from the public wishing to speak on item number 7?
We have no speakers on any of these items.
That's great. Thank you. Again, no action is required for these items, and at this time, we'll move on to item 10 on the agenda, which is a closed session. Before we do that, I want to thank everyone for being patient during today's meeting. I'll be placing the public on hold for the duration of this item, and we'll reconnect the call after closed session. And Kim, can you please take us into closed session?
Of course, Chair Abbott, thanks very much. Good morning, everybody. At this time, the committee will go into closed session for a conference with its legal counsel regarding existing litigation under Government Code 54956.9A, and this is with regard to the matter of John Walker versus Golden Gate Bridge Highway and Transportation District.
Great, thank you very much.
This call is being recorded.
We are back in open session.
Great, thank you very, very much. I'm going to ask our District Attorney, Kim Manolius, to please report out on the closed session report.
Thanks, Chair Abbott. The committee did meet in closed session for some existing litigation under Government Code 54956.9A with regard to the matter of John Walker versus Golden Gate Bridge, and the committee gave its lawyer appropriate guidance as to how to proceed. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you very much. Madam Secretary, do we have any members of the public wishing to address this committee under item 11, public comment?
Yes, we do. We have Mr. Pilpel on the line with us today. In a second, I'm going to introduce Mr. Pilpel.
Great.
Hi there, Mr. Pilpel. Are you still with us?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Excellent. I'm David Pilpel. I think we've met. Okay, so I'm sorry I joined the call a little late. I had some comments back on item 7, the budget status report. So looking to my favorite chart on page 27, if I can turn to that for a moment. On line 1, the fiscal 21-22 ARP first tranche, I think it would be easier to keep straight the various federal allocations and MTC allocations and the various tranches and all that, to just add there what was the date of the MTC allocation action, because frankly, I can't remember for the first tranche. And then line A, the toll revenue carryover, I think I would also clarify on that that's carryover from fiscal 2020, 2021, as opposed to it's not carryover to next year, it's carryover of toll revenues from last fiscal year, just so that the thing is pretty clear. And I think that makes sense and puts it in balance. I believe, if I recall correctly, that the CRISA funds have been allocated and spent. This covers the first tranche of the ARP money, does not include the second tranche of the ARP money. So I'm wondering what is the approximate balance of the ARP money that has not yet been allocated. Maybe we don't put it on the chart because it's not yet been allocated from MTC, but there is some range that one might project there, and therefore how much of that total fund balance would be carried over to fiscal 22-23, and ultimately, as I've commented in the past, I'm wondering when the fiscal cliff is at this point. So when do all of those funds run out? I believe it's like the end of calendar 22, plus or minus right now, but it depends on actions that are taken in the next 15 months. And ultimately, I think we do need a new strategic financial plan that takes all this into account. And finally, as transit service plans evolve, this board will need to make decisions on bridge tolls and bus and ferry transit fares to keep things in balance, as well as other actions in what I hope would be a new strategic financial plan. Those are my thoughts on the budget at this time. I hope that makes sense. Thanks very much.
Thank you, David. Madam Secretary, is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
We have no other speakers.
David, appreciate your comments. The only thing I can say on the second tranche is that methodology hasn't been determined yet, so yeah, it would be a shot in the dark to try to figure that out, or if it's following the same methodology that the first tranche of dollars came out of. But do appreciate your comments, and I'm sure that Mr. Weier had heard them as well. So with that takes us to the end of the agenda. May I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved, Director Terrio.
Great, and a second by?
I'll second.
All right, if there are no objections, that concludes the meeting of the Finance Auditing Committee. I want to thank my colleagues. It is 10:08 a.m., and we shall see or hear each other tomorrow morning.